You have to be comfortable with not having the answers to the questions that the old story answered, such as what's real, how does the world work, what's important, who am I, what's the purpose of life. To be in between stories, you don't know who you are. You don't know what's real. You don't know how to do this thing called life. And it's a very tender and sacred place to be. I'm Charles Eisenstein, and this is the Lifestylist Podcast.
I'm Luke Story, and this is episode 392, Healing the Collective and Awakening to Unity, featuring Charles Eisenstein. Our sponsors today are Inside Tracker, Leela Quantum, Juve, and Blue Blocks. Charles Eisenstein is an essayist, speaker, and the author of several books, including The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. Now, I've been following his work for some time and just waiting to pounce on the perfect moment to host him on the show. And folks, thankfully, that moment is now. Charles is a profoundly thoughtful person and one I continue to learn from and be inspired by ongoing. If you'd like to get to know the work of Charles Eisenstein even better in terms of exploring his incredible books and essays, you can find all of them linked at lukestory.com/Charles. You'll find all of the show notes for everything we talk about today at lukestory.com/Charles. And I will also add that if you like this episode, you'll love my Telegram channel, where I post everything I want to say that would get me nuked from the other communistic social media platforms. You can find it by visiting lukestory.com/Telegram. That's lukestory.com/Telegram. However, I must warn you to enter at your own risk. It's pretty controversial in there. Okay, now on to a brief topic breakdown. And in the interest of time, I, of course, have omitted so many of the incredible moments during this conversation. But these were a few that piqued my interest when I sat to do the intro today. The necessity of seeing those on the other side as potential allies, how we can support those stuck in the struggle of resisting cognitive dissonance to achieve acceptance of truth, the intersection of doing the inner work that uplifts the world around us and the desire to exert our will on the external world, the many nuances of good versus evil and the game of duality, the recent inversion of liberal and conservative values that has hijacked our compassionate nature in the name of authoritarianism. We also talk a bit about the work of my main teacher, Dr. David R. Hawkins, and how his book Power versus Force relates to the prophetic teachings of the 12 Steps. Charles goes on to explain the true nature of our physical heart as a listening organ, deconstructing the widely accepted notion that it is a simple mechanical pump, removing the desire to punish those who are causing suffering in the world, the difference between COVID-19 and the other chronic diseases of the past that you will never forget, and finally, how to empower yourself by learning the difference between common law and maritime law. Very interesting stuff right there, my friends. I would definitely stay tuned through the end of this conversation. And if you take anything away from this episode, I hope it's the fact that we must be able to find empathy and forgiveness for all people, even those people we categorize as the most diabolical and wrong. My hope is that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Here, my friends, is the brilliant Charles Eisenstein. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Luke. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you rolled through town. And I got wind of it and was able to track you down. You're someone I've wanted to have a conversation with for a while. And as I was telling you before we recorded, I'm just like, I'm going to wait until it's not a Zoom. And then magically you appeared. I want to start by asking you, the world is in such a strange transition right now. And I think from one perspective, people could say we're in a really bad way. Others could say we're in an awakening about which we don't know the outcome yet, but ultimately good will prevail. To you, what's the most exciting and amazing thing in your life right now?
I have the feeling of a lot of new horizons opening and the shifting of my tribe through this process of that we're calling COVID. There's been a lot of rearrangement. People who I had thought of as deep allies have taken a different path. And I've learned, I think one thing maybe I would say we've learned who is brave and who is reliable and who is willing to change. One of the most important character qualities that I've come to appreciate and to cultivate in myself is the willingness to be wrong and to accept that and to not hold so tightly onto a story and narrative in which I'm the hero, in which I've been right all along, in which I'm going to be vindicated. That's all kind of a domination mentality that it's been very freeing to, I can't say I've totally let go of it, but to let go of it a bit. And I think that maybe one thing to answer your question that gives me a lot of hope and optimism is that I'm starting to see signs on a collective level, even at the same time as there's a lot of doubling down on old stories. I feel like they're loosening their grip. And that gives me a lot of excitement and hope for the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see as all of these changes have taken place, that sort of addiction or attachment to positionality, right? And because we're dealing with so many things that seem to just, I mean, literally threaten one's life, right? And so you have people just kind of pushed to the edges of their base instincts. And within that rigid perspective of who's right and who's wrong, and that sort of ego gratification of self-righteousness. I mean, I see a lot of that, but as you said, also, I think there's a lot of moderate people that maybe weren't involved in some of these difficult conversations that are sort of being brought to the table because of the necessity of their contribution or lack thereof.
And I think it's also really important to hold that for each other rather than seeing each other, especially people on the other side, as so set in their beliefs that they're never going to change, and to cast them as the enemy who have to be overcome and defeated in order for change to happen. I don't think that is even a realistic formula for change. I think that it's not, that change is going to happen not as a victory over the other side,
right?
But because many in the other side defect, because in fact, they were never as ideologically committed as we might have thought they were. And why did we think they were? Well, it actually is validating to yourself to hold the other side as these irreconcilable enemies. So there's a lot of psychology in here that is coming up through the social political environment that we're in, like huge opportunity for learning about ourselves.
Yeah, I guess if we're willing to do so. What about the kind of phenomenon that I see so much outside of like the victim perpetrator narrative and us versus them, but just this massive, large scale cognitive dissonance that people are experiencing? I think so many people are realizing, oh, wow, this system in which we live as a human species is broken, and there's so much deceit and corruption within that system, specifically kind of from the top of the pyramid of the system trickling down. And as long as we had our job and our family and our food and everything was kind of covered, we didn't have to question it. And now that many people have been given the opportunity to question it, there's also a large sect of people that are sort of covering their eyes and ears and saying, no, it can't be so. And kind of towing, the party line and just adamantly siding with the state and unable to acknowledge that there are, in fact, nefarious characters at some of the highest levels of our cultures. And there's just this incredible denial in that.
Mm-hmm. So for one thing, it's really hard to let go of a belief, especially when it's not some disembodied, abstract intellectual belief, but it involves your own identity. And beliefs about the world, how the world works, usually involve yourself because you play a role in that world. And who you are is defined in relation to the system. So when your view of the system begins to disintegrate, when contradictions appear more and more undeniably, it's a crisis in identity, and therefore a threat to the ego's construction of itself. I recently read about how when your life is threatened, like say I had a gun to your head, the part of the amygdala that responds is exactly the same as when I assault one of your beliefs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's taken up at that level of threat. And I think
Wow.
we have to understand that, and not be contemptuous of people who are clinging to their beliefs. But we have to understand, like, this is a huge challenge that a lot of people are facing now. And so the question then is, how do we make that easier for people to go through the process of cognitive dissonance and release and stepping into the I don't know? Because that's the way station in between the old story and the new story.
I don't know. That's good.
It's
That's
the space
good.
between stories.
Yeah.
Where you have to be comfortable with not having the answers to the questions that the old story answered, such as what's real, how does the world work, what's important, who am I, what's the purpose of life. To be in between stories, you don't know who you are. You don't know what's real. You don't know how to do this thing called life. And it's a very tender and sacred place to be. And I think that we can actually encourage change to happen faster by holding a gracious, gentle, and generous space for people to move through that process.
Wow. I like that. Yeah. The way station. I think that spot is informed by humility and open-mindedness, right? I mean, to me, that's kind of the gateway of personal and interpersonal and even change on a larger scale, is that, hey, this is what I think and this is what I believe to be true. I know that I have an awareness that I'm deeply identified with this position, but there's a willingness to surrender the positionality and to have the courage to weather the perceived storm of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Luke, yesterday you said that XYZ was true, and now you're saying you're flip-flopping. There's that whole thing. They're flip-flopping. You can't trust them. I mean, I love people that flip-flop, right? I mean, not out of integrity, but someone who has a point of view that's firmly held and says, wow, you know what? I have to admit, there was another way to look at this. It's so healthy. I mean, just saying it feels good in my nervous system to just like let go of that clinging to what I think is right and what I think is a representation of who and what I am versus just an idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just in case anyone thinks I'm being preachy, like it's not that me and my side and our side, we've arrived at the truth, and other people still have to go through this process of letting go. Okay. I don't care who you are. The nature of our times, the initiatory moment that we are in, will offer every single person an opportunity to go through this in one way or another. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit for rhetorical effect, but the offering is that there's something that you held dear that may not be true, or may be true no longer. And what does true mean? Partly it's a state of being, that because the story that we live in co-resonates with a state of human beingness. And as we grow and fulfill that story and that state of being, then the story that contains our growth becomes confining, and we want to break free. And often the breakout, at first it's just another version of the same thing, because you haven't actually gotten to that point of total surrender, the total I don't know. It doesn't have to be like every aspect of life I don't know, but there's something that was held dear, something that was part of who you were. And that's why I think that these times are initiatory. And so, like, if you don't mind, I don't want to dominate the conversation too much.
No, you're supposed to dominate the conversation. And please do, because otherwise I will. Afterward, I'll be like, Luke, shut up. You talk too much. So no, please. I love listening to you talk.
Okay. There's a lot on my mind these days.
And right. I mean, I think people that are aware of your work and those that weren't are going to be after this conversation. But no, I mean, when you rap, bro, like I dig it. So please.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So one of the things that struck me as you were talking, so like the cognitive dissonance of seeing that there are nefarious characters at the apex of the power structure, administering a system that is not to our benefit. And that is an awakening. And it can also be a return to the comfort zone of a deeper story, which is the fundamental pattern of diagnosis of if there's evil in the world, it's caused by a perpetrator, caused by a pathogen. Like that's the basic diagnosis. And the solution then is if you get rid of the pathogen, if you get rid of those horrible people in the power structure, the problem is solved. And it can be bewildering revelation to encounter people in the power structure and experience them as not particularly evil at all, but as avatars of a system, of an ideology that prescribes their roles and has them do things that cause a lot of evil, even if they have no consciousness of malice. So, I think of people like Bill Gates in that regard. And I'm not saying like he's, a good guy necessarily, but like I could see how somebody who is fully immersed in the ideology of control and technology and the ideology that human advancement means that we apply technology to more and more areas of life, that we datify, quantify, track, and control everything, rationally administer it so that we can maximize the good of all. And who's in charge of this? Well, the good guys are. I am. And so I can imagine Bill Gates having the consciousness of wanting to serve humanity. And the way to do it.
This is good. You're stretching my capacity for greater understanding.
The way to do it is to control everything.
Right.
Like
including the population and
yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's people out there who are going to commit some crimes, but we can anticipate that. We could have implants in everybody that would measure the stress hormones that precede violence. And there could be like a kill switch. I mean, maybe not kill them, but, render them, incapacitate them. Like, why wouldn't that be good? And okay, yeah, it could be abused, but luckily we good guys, we smart guys, we rational guys, usually it's guys, are in power. And so we're not going to let that happen. We're only going to use it for the good. And part of the good is protecting our power from those who would usurp it, who may not be good. So we have to control the opposition, who are poisoning the body politic with fake information, fake news, disinformation. So like this mentality of power can exist without anybody malicious at the top. Now, there could also be highly psychopathic individuals in the power structure, even at the top. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but in my understanding, it's not necessary to explain things. And then so I go to the deeper pattern of diagnosis, and I see a parallel between the diagnosis of evil in the world being a diabolical cabal and the diagnosis of the decline of health being a pathogen or a bunch of pathogens. There was a comfort, almost a relief when COVID hit, because here we have an entire generation that's getting sicker and sicker. Whether you talk about, autoimmunity, addiction, depression, like all of these chronic conditions, allergies, just at levels many times what they were when I was a kid. But there's something not going, it's not going well. And we don't know what to do about it. Like there's no pathogen. They would love to find the gene that causes X, the virus that causes Y. They would love that. Because why? Because we know what to do. There's something to fight, something to control. So finally, COVID comes along and this latent anxiety, and it's not just about health. Okay. I mean, our society is degenerating in many ways, ecologically, socially, politically. COVID comes along, and now we can focus all of that latent anxiety and fear onto something that we can control through lockdowns, through distancing, et cetera, like all that stuff, masks, vaccines. It fits the old story. So I just want to put a word in for a deep questioning of all of the dimensions of the story of progress through control. Because I think that the real revolution here is not going to happen by, hauling out the perpetrators, the psychopaths, the corrupt, and sending them to the guillotine. We've seen that story before. They're not the first. I mean, they're not the last to be guillotined.
Yeah.
Nope.
As someone who spends so much time, energy, and money to be healthy, I want to keep track of what's working and what's not. That's why I'm really into this company I found called Inside Tracker. They are an ultra-personalized performance system that analyzes data from your blood, DNA, lifestyle, and fitness tracker to help you optimize your body and reach your health and wellness goals. Through their app and testing protocol, I'm able to get a clear picture of what my body looks like on the inside. And I also get a clear measure of whether my diet, supplement, and exercise choices are helping or even hurting. I did the whole Inside Tracker deal recently and was actually shocked to find that I was less than perfect in some areas. My cholesterol and B vitamins were high, for example, and a few other things that needed a little tweaking. There was, of course, also some good news, as my overall health score was that of a much younger person and certainly more optimized than your average American. And that's the point. The whole goal with Inside Tracker is to be optimized, not normal. So they don't merely show you the normal biomarker zones, they show you the optimal biomarker zones and numbers that are best for your individual body. So if you want to check this out, I highly recommend you sign up for Inside Tracker now. You're going to get your testing done, the results of your biomarkers, and then some incredible lifestyle and diet recommendations from their brainiac scientists to help you improve everything you find. Just go to insidetracker.com/Luke, where you will save 25% off your entire order. That's insidetracker.com/Luke.
This brings me to, one of the major inquiries, not only for myself, but for so many people. And it's sort of at the base of atheism in many ways. And that is, okay, if there is a malevolent, all-intelligent, all-loving creator or being, then how and why is there the existence of evil and the humans and entities that perpetrate this evil? And I've been able to zoom out from that pretty far at times, specifically in ceremony. And I've looked at someone like Bill Gates or people that I perceive to be these diabolical, evil characters and gotten to the place where in a world of duality, they're playing their role perfectly, right? But then coming out of that awareness and back into being this guy they call Luke Story, walking around and wanting to make a positive contribution to my own life and the lives of those I interface with, there still then comes back, yeah, but we still have to stop them. But there's just going to be another one and another one and another one until consciousness collectively is able to sort of rise above or supersede that duality. And without this duality, we don't really have the grist for the mill in Earth School to have contrast of choice. So if I incarnate as this guy and I don't have something on the other end of the spectrum of the most diabolically evil political person in power versus, the Dalai Lama or whoever, Mother Teresa, these holy people are at least people that we at least hold up to that. It's like, if I don't have options, then what am I doing here? Mm-hmm. There has to be the contrast of duality in order to have that human experience. So that leaves me with kind of a almost not like apathy in a sad, low energy way, but it's just like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't try to change anything except myself. And then that leads us back into kind of what I was alluding to before we recorded. I don't know that there's a question in there, but it's almost like the world is perfect just as it is. Do your own work and just focus on getting along with your stepmom. You know what I mean? It's like the kind of mass spiritual bypass of focusing on the externals and wanting to change and get rid of all these characters that are just going to be replaced versus what can I do interpersonally within myself to elevate consciousness and escape my own trap of duality and good versus evil and all that. There's totally not a question in there, but
there's lots
just
of
kind of,
yeah.
you know, anything you want to grab in there. These are the things just I wake up going, what do I do with this? Because it's all perfect, really. It's all the way it's supposed to be. Yet I, for some reason, feel within me I need to change things.
Yeah. Okay. So first, this is not a question that can be resolved by principle. So here's another basic solution template that we need to question, which is that in order to know what to do in life, you formulate a differentiating principle. So like the principle of, okay, do the inner work first, or don't try to change the system, or it's all good. Like we're looking for some kind of crutch.
Right.
You know?
I want a definitive answer that this is the way you do it. That's not the way you do it.
Right. But in fact, you already know what to do. And the evolution of the collective organism of humanity and beyond, Gaia, it's actually even cosmic, you have a role in that. And the role is communicated to you mostly through the body and through the heart and through the blood that soaks up everything happening. How esoteric should I get here, or how woo-woo should I get here?
All the way. Take it as far as you can.
So you know how water is a carrier of information, and the blood is especially sensitive to everything happening in the world. So it is patterned by the ecological and psychic field of this planet, and moving through the heart is primarily a listening organ, not a pump. In fact, it isn't a pump at all. Like, how could a pump push a viscous fluid through like miles of vessels? It's not a pump. It catches and passes forward and listens to the blood and receives that information, translates it into passion, into care, into love. So the signal from the coordinating power of the evolutionary process comes through the heart in the form of, what do you care about? And at one moment in your life, you may know that repairing the relationship with your mother-in-law is the best thing you could do for the planet. But you don't even frame it in those terms. Like, you know what to do because you are life, just like an animal knows what to do. Contacting that knowledge and the truth of what I said is a powerful awakening of that knowledge. So that's like my preamble to this. You said, but these people have to be stopped, right? Yes, they have to be stopped. And sometimes that signal of care will have you put your body between the perpetrator and the victim. I'm not advocating any kind of withdrawal from engagement in the issues of our day. They have to be stopped as part of the change when that is what's calling to you. They don't have to be punished. When you slip into...
That's the juice right there.
Yes.
You know, that's when I think the ego feels like the change that it wants has transpired, is that those people who are causing suffering suffer, right? Mm-hmm. It's the whole thing we saw in 2016. I hate these people that hate people.
Right.
That mentality, right? I want to punish them because they've hurt people. You know, it's this vicious cycle of the egoic victim perpetrator model that just goes around and around in circles.
Which is the template. The template of that is imposing suffering for the good.
Oh, right.
And that is what dictators, tyrants have done for thousands of years. It's always justified. Oh, but our justifications are good and theirs are bad. We're on the side of good. So that gives us license to do evil because we're on the side of good. It brings up my favorite quote, Philip K. Dick. To fight the empire is to be infected with its derangement. This is a paradox. Whoever defeats a segment of the empire becomes the empire. It proliferates like a virus, imposing its form on its enemies. Thereby, it becomes its enemies. Like you are actually part of the empire when you participate in the mentality of vengeance, of punishment, of imposing suffering for the good, because they deserve it. There will come a moment where you have to decide, and this could be in your personal realm, it could be in your social, political engagement. There will come a moment where you have to choose between punishment and healing. And you'll have to choose if it is necessary for the healing of society, if it is necessary for all of this to stop, that the perpetrators get off scot-free, do you accept that? They walk. And maybe they're never humiliated and you're never vindicated.
Right.
But it changes.
Right.
But it
right,
stops.
Right.
Are you willing to do that?
That's good.
If you're not willing, that means you're serving something else besides healing on a subtle level. And the call, the call to participate in the transformation that is before us requires absolute, impeccable dedication to the aim of healing. If we want to experience that in our lifetimes, we have to put everything else on the altar and commit to that. And, if you do that 90%, we'll live in a 90% healed world. If you do it even 1%, the world will still be much more beautiful in a generation than it is today. But we have an opportunity to give it 100%.
Well, this brings the contrast of power versus force, right? Because what you're describing to me is an unconditional love, an unconditional compassion, unconditional forgiveness for the totality of human expression, even as it expresses individually through these quote unquote enemies, right? And that energy field of love and forgiveness is infinitely more powerful than the biggest fit of rage that you could summon, right? I mean, anger has some power, right? Fear has power, courage has power, but nothing has power of love. I mean, this is where a mother lifts the car off the baby, and this is where people are able to endure great suffering. And Viktor Frankl, to turn it around and help thousands of people with their message, right? It's like nothing beats that, right? That's the Trump card. Not to say the T word. I try not to say the word Trump on my show. I mean, the listeners, I don't think get triggered, but it's just a funny thing I always say. At least I think it's funny. But, I mean, this really is it. So if the way to a more fulfilling subjective experience is to universally and objectively just throw more love and compassion at this whole thing and understand that every perpetrator that I have vilified is truly doing what they believe to be right, and at one level are inherently innocent. I mean, everyone's really innocent, right? Because each person is doing what they believe to be right. But within that, I think you kind of alluded to this, where sometimes love is like, no, stop, fuck you. That's also love, right? That's, someone's victimizing someone that you care about, and that love expresses itself as a firm boundary. That's also still love. So I think that's where I get kind of caught up, because I have a pretty easy time of forgiving all of these baddies, and just going, wow, I don't know the full picture. In 200 years, 500 years, we'll look back and go, this George Soros was like the perfect thing we needed at this point in time, because look at, the ball of thread that unraveled after that. And here we are living in utopia. And that was a necessary linchpin of that great experience.
So as you were saying before, the perpetrators, whether you're talking about people or ideologies or systems, they give us an opportunity to love when it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, they give us an opportunity to be brave. Otherwise, we would never really know who we are. We would never know ourselves to be capable of choosing love when our lives are threatened or our livelihoods are threatened. So this process of revelation and growth requires what we're calling evil. And I generally agree that, whatever, Bill Gates, George Soros, that they are very much products of their conditions, their subculture, their upbringing, and the reigning ideologies of modernity that are in especially distilled form in the worlds of tech and power politics. And if I were in that totality of circumstances, I would very likely do as they do.
Yeah, totally.
Right? That's forgiveness. Forgiveness is simply understanding. It's not an act of indulgence. It's not patronizing. It's not tolerant. It's not saying, oh, well, I would do better than you if I were in your circumstances, but I'm a nice guy, so I'm not going to hold it over you. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is the authentic understanding that, yeah, if that were me, I might do that too. And how deep can you go into that? There was a case a number of years ago of a woman who drowned her 5 kids in the bathtub, one after the other, each one knowing something was horribly wrong, waiting their turn. And it was like, that's one of the ones that really got under my skin as a parent. I mean, unimaginable. And I really went like, what would it take for me to do that? What would it take for me to be in such deep despair and despondency and psychosis? What would have to happen to me? What would have to happen to me to act like, the people that I demonize act? Can I go there? Because if I can't, if I say, well, they're just evil, that means I'm shying away from actually going there. And maybe I never will know exactly the reasons. But that's what forgiveness is. It comes as a result of trying to understand. And the marker that you do not fully understand is when you're in judgment. Judgment meaning they're just different. I wouldn't do that if I were them. So all that said, there is also the phenomenon of a psychopath. But I think that true psychopaths are A, misunderstood, and B, much rarer than we think. That psychopathic tendencies are are activated by the system. But like the real psychopaths are usually not in positions of top power, because one of the really underappreciated traits of psychopathy, there's a fantastic book, the original book on psychopathy by this guy Cleckley. It's written in the 40s, called The Mask of Sanity. And the ruthlessness and total lack of compassion is one of the axes that describes a psychopath. The other axis is impulsivity.
Right.
Taking ridiculous risks for trivial rewards, just to get a kick. Like, that does not lend itself well to being in power. So anyway, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of psychopathy, but just to say, sometimes you just have to stop somebody from doing something. But to diagnose the whole system on that term is a trap. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. But again, I can understand pretty much everything that's happening without thinking that it's a consciously conspiring, diabolical cabal in charge. And that is disorienting, because then we don't know what to do. We know how to save the world if it is a diabolical cabal that can be removed.
Yeah, you just pick all the ticks off the dog.
Yep. Same solution as everything else. Kill something.
Yeah.
Same solution as weeds in the field. Kill them. Same solution as terrorists. Kill them. Kill, destroy, conquer, force the perimeter. Like, we're comfortable with that. But if the evil is systemic, if it enrolls each of us as participants in it, and if it can't be reduced to specific individuals, then what do you do? That is a pregnant question. And if you are able to step into that unknown, into that uncertainty, new powers will be born. And you were speaking of one of them, you called it the power of love. Tremendous creativity comes from being in reality. The reality of, if I were you, Mr. Soros, I might be doing the same as you're doing. So what is it like to be you? That's what compassion is. What is it like to be you? It's not, again, an indulgence. And maybe the result is, yeah, I'm going to fight you with every force-based tool at my disposal. That could be the conclusion, but it's not the predestined conclusion, as it is when I see people as irredeemably evil. Seeing them that way, we're locked into war as the only way to change things. And so much of our discourse, around, say, health freedom, it's framed in these war metaphors, which are, I'm not saying that it's never appropriate, but we have to open our palette to other colors to paint a picture of a more beautiful world.
I've been into energetic healing technologies for many years, especially those that are supportive for EMF exposure. And there are a lot of so-called quantum products on the market, and I've tried just about any one I've ever heard of, but few of them have had any noticeable effect. However, there is one product line that's passed my test and become part of my arsenal, and it's called Lila Quantum Tech. Lila Quantum has developed a groundbreaking technology to increase your energy level, become more stress resistant, and also helps to support your whole family, pets, and garden with pure quantum energy. The Lila Quantum products have been certified and studied by various third-party institutes and doctors, and these studies have found significant improvements in people's blood, cellular voltage, allergy reduction, and heart rate variability. But my favorite benefit of all is that the Lila Quantum products help neutralize harmful frequencies, including any EMF like 4G, 5G, microwaves, and Wi-Fi. In fact, I have the Lila Quantum block in my kitchen where I charge my food, drinks, and supplements, as well as the Infinity block in my living room and here in the studio for a huge energetic upgrade. Lila Quantum Tech is a truly conscious business that wants to do good in the world and even plants a tree for every order. So if you want to hook up your energetic environment and have a tree planted on your behalf, you can go to lilaq.com and use the code Luke10 to save 10% off your first order. That's LEELAQ.com, and the discount code is Luke10 for new customers.
I mean, it goes to the line of thinking that, spending one's energy or collective energy on tearing down a system, right? So we have this industrial pharmaceutical system, which to me is at the present time, especially, is a great threat to humankind in general. I mean, just to blanket the whole thing, I'm like,
totally,
wow. Yeah. So we got to fire the CEO, put this one in prison, yada, 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 right? Like that's kind of the immediate, perceived gratification. Versus the other idea of just, cool, you guys do your thing over here. We're going to build this other thing. And we're just busy constructively building this other thing and, hoping that it kind of outgrows yours, right? Mm-hmm. It seems to me that that's probably the most effective way to do it. I'm using a really simplistic example of that, but that could also be interpersonally.
See, again, like that, I think that's important. But again, I would say you can't say that that is the solution as a principle. But a lot of people are called to that. And, you could make the argument that that's the way to go. But, then again, like you create your beautiful parallel system and then it gets crushed. So there's also...
Right. Yeah. There's no way out of this. One thing I want to touch on that I think is really important, especially because we have so much division now. I mean, things have really gotten quite black and white. At least in this country, and I guess in many Western countries, you're with us or you're with them. I mean, it's just, there's not a lot of overlap. And this idea that when I look at someone with whom I vehemently disagree and judge, that if I can project myself into their life experience, if I was born to their mother in that hospital with that missing or abusive father and so on and so on and so on, that I would be making the exact same choices they are. right? But it's difficult for me to get there because my experience was different, right? So to find that compassion. But I think that's such a beautiful exercise. And it sort of stops at, I think what we just covered is, okay, yeah, so I'm there, but how is that not, co-signing or sort of enabling them to perpetuate however that experience is manifesting that's negatively impacting so many other people? It's like, how do we forgive someone and still stop them?
Well, one thing you can do is to introduce a new element into their circumstances. Every interaction you have with somebody changes their circumstances. So you could take, say, like a very stingy, ungenerous person, and you give a gift to them that's important to them that disrupts their view of reality and human nature. That, yeah, everyone's in it for themselves, that we live in a world of scarcity, that it's not safe to give. And you provide a glaring exception to that in the right moment, and it gets under their skin. And that data point doesn't fit into their story, which means that it is an offering for them to let go of that story, not a guarantee that they will, but it's an anomaly. And so that's like just a little micro example.
That's really good. That's really good. I do that on a good day. It's I don't know where I picked this up. One of my teachers must have passed this along to me, but like you walk into the bank and you're in a good mood. You're just chilling, living your life. You got to go do the thing, transaction, and you go up to the counter and the person is just hateful, just being super bitchy, super dicky. And of course not of course, but at times that impulse would be like, meet them with that, right? And I've made a practice, not perfectly, obviously, but getting much better at this is just like, especially like actually sending that energy field of love to people. It's really easy to do when it's met with a smile and that's what they're automatically giving you. But to just like love the anger out of someone in that situation and almost use it as a challenge to myself. Like, can I pattern interrupt this person's negative experience of their life or of me interacting with them? Can I watch that transmutation happen? Can I be a willing participant in that micro experience of turning the energy around in an interaction? I love doing this. But not in a, because you could be like, oh, how are you? You could fake it, right? And be sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like placating or kind of one-upping someone because you're being more compassionate and they're, lower on the totem pole of their spiritual evolution or whatever. But really, really doing it and really loving on them and seeing that grimace turn into a smile. And I mean, it's like, who knows what the ripple effect of that is, right? They go have a meeting with the manager and that goes better, or their subordinate, or they get home and pick their kids up from school and they're just a little more compassionate and that kid had a hard day and so on and so on and so on. This ripple effect just of 1/10,000th of a second decision on my part to just go that way. Just lean that way, just a hair. That's all it takes. And I think it's a beautiful way to live. It gives us something to work on continually, right?
Yes.
Because it's never, oh yeah, that thing, I read that in that spiritual book and I did that, I passed that stage. Well, no, you didn't, because you're still in a body, right? There's still going to be an opportunity to exert that level of unconditional compassion, empathy, love for the people with whom you interact.
Yeah, it's an orientation. I mean, most of these interactions will be micro interactions. And, maybe, I mean, you don't want to like say it's going to, change someone's life because I smiled at them in the checkout line. But the more that, like those micro interactions are also practice for the more significant interactions.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Kind of building that muscle. So when it's a higher stakes exchange or interaction, like familial, something like that, you're in a divorce now, or separation of a business partnership, and how can you bring
and
that?
The temptation to hold them in a story of they're deplorable, they're horrible, is so strong.
Totally.
And this, it's really it's a basic form of solidarity. It's like, I refuse to see you as an enemy. And maybe, circumstances have converged so that we are on opposite sides of something, but fundamentally, we're in this together, in this drama of life. And I'm not going to forget that. And I'm constantly making peace offerings, constantly making invitations to step into that knowledge of solidarity, because our differences of opinion, even the ones that erupt into conflict, they are based on delusion. All of the conflict that comes from the people on the other side are just horrible. That is all based on a lie. You have to paint people as horrible in order to go to war against them. And we see in our politics right now, both sides painting the other side as horrible. You get rid of that. Okay, there still might be differences of opinion, but this common agreement that the other side is horrible, that both sides share, disappears. And the agreements, the disagreements are then so easy to resolve because there's not this other agenda of winning. You know, it's like, yeah,
Right.
I will. So this is solidarity. That if you think that this planet is going to heal, that life is going to improve without solidarity, you're going to be disappointed. Because this is the nature of the revolution right now. So in some of these micro interactions, it's hard to know, like, what to do in a situation where someone's just being really rude to you. And maybe sometimes you can't reach them. But the orientation, you're always attuned to an opportunity. And that attunement becomes a habit. Like you're always looking for the right thing to say. And the willingness and desire to do that generates creativity and spontaneity, often taking the form of humor. Like when all else fails, the deepest common denominator we have is humor, because humor is an offering that it's an invitation to step outside of these roles and opinions that we take so seriously. And that's why humor is offensive to highly ideologically committed people.
Right.
The stereotype of the feminist, that's not funny,
Right.
like, or it's happening in politics a lot today. So humor actually, you have to actually accept the peace offering to laugh with somebody. Because really what you're saying is it's not all that serious. And so you step outside the matrix through humor with someone. And so that's like if I'm, at the airport or something like that, that's the offering that I like to make. I mean, yeah, I like to smile at people, be polite, be friendly. But sometimes it's the humor that makes people feel not alone anymore.
Yeah, it's one of my other favorite things to do is to kind of break someone out of their social role by just pattern interrupting, by saying something that I at least perceive to be funny. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, right. Like airport's a great example, right? You're at the ticket counter and every person's just like, here's the idea, and
Right.
not necessarily being outgoing or friendly. And I love when someone's especially in a uniform and I just ignore their whole uniform and just like, what's up, dude? Like, just talk to them like I would one of my friends or a normal person and have the same sort of lightness and sense of humor. And you can't always do it. There's a guy at the UPS store over here. I've been working on him for a good 3 months and hi, sir. How are you? Oh, okay. What can I do for you today? He sounds like he's like on a TV commercial.
Yeah.
But I'm standing there right with him. And I haven't gotten to him, but many others I have, where I'm just like, hey, man, human right here. You're a human. I see you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to see me, but I see you. Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Like just pattern interrupt.
It's an invitation.
Break that rule.
People can say no to the invitation and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. I guess I'm not. Because I'm still working on this one, but I'll get through to them or I won't, You
won't. I mean, sometimes, it's also a bit of boldness and holding that solidarity more important than maybe some image. Like one thing that just came to me is like, I'm at the juice bar at the airport, like there's a juice thing. And I'm like, yeah, don't put pineapple on that, please. Pineapple gives me hemorrhoids. Did you really want to know that? Maybe not. Never mind. I didn't say that. Like just something like that. Like it's pretty hard to pretend to be normal when you talk about your swollen hemorrhoids. It's like the creativity comes from letting go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of I don't know, you can just feel the ease in your nervous system when one stops taking themselves that seriously. The ability to kind of laugh at yourself without being, false humility or being self-deprecating or coming from a shame place, but really just coming from I guess it's just humility, right? It's like seeing yourself more realistically for who and what you are and where you are and where you aren't, kind of taking some degree of ownership for the good parts about yourself and also acknowledging the things you need to work on.
Right.
Because I used to view humility as like, it was more of the false humility. Like you give me a compliment, I'm like, no, not me. I'm not that smart or that talented or whatever you're complimenting me for. But that's actually kind of not humility because I'm not just acknowledging a truth, right? It's like not wanting to play too big or play too small. Playing small is also kind of a shadow ego thing, right? It's not humble to play small and not be in your full expression. But to be in your full expression at the expense of others or in a self-perceived way of being superior to others, then you lean into ego. But somewhere in the middle, there's kind of just a loose, lighthearted, humorous way of being that is always kind of the place I'm wanting to stay as much as I can. It's kind of a center line of being on that beam of kind of wearing the world like a loose garment and not taking anything too serious, including and especially myself.
Yeah. And I want to just add in one thing here. Another one of these like really deep patterns that it will be overturned in this revolution. Don't take any of what we're saying as a new instruction set about how to be good. It's like, okay, now I know how to be a good person. I'll walk this balance beam, I'll be compassionate. I'll be like, that's not the reason we're doing this. And really, if you excavate this being good, what it really means is being acceptable. What it really means is getting approval from the internalized parent and the internalized social group. And that craving to be a good person, to see yourself as a good person. It's really what the craving is. And for others to see you as a good person. That comes from a deep-seated self-rejection and history of conditional love that is, we get it from our parents along with the unconditional love. We get it from society. I mean, it's endemic in society. So that it comes from a wound. And to recognize that and to touch the part of you that doesn't need to be seen as a good person, but can trust yourself without that reward, shame bludgeon that we think we have to use to keep ourselves on that balance beam.
Yeah.
Without that, then who do you become? Can you actually trust yourself without this enforcer? It's kind of scary to step into that.
Well, folks, winter is here, and we all know what that means. The days are getting shorter and colder, and we'll have less of a chance to get the healthy, natural sunlight we need. Thankfully, I've got a hack for that. It's my Joovv red light therapy system. That's Joovv. Now, of course, Joovv can't replace natural sunlight, but it does deliver similar wavelengths of light like red and near-infrared that have been clinically proven to be very beneficial for your health. In fact, thousands of peer-reviewed research articles have demonstrated the benefits of this light spectrum for things like skin health, reduced pain and inflammation, and faster muscle recovery. I've been using my Joovv just about every day for the past 4 years, and it's one tool that I would definitely not want to live without. Another cool feature of Joovv's latest generation of products is something they call ambient mode, which is a lower power red light that helps balance out the blue light in your environment, or you can just use it alone as a super bright red light before bed. So now this winter is the best time ever to invest in a Joovv unit, and for a limited time, Joovv is offering all of my listeners an exclusive discount on your first order. Just go to joovv.com and apply my code Luke to your qualifying order. That's joovv.com/Luke. Of course, some exclusions apply as this is a limited time offer, so hurry up and swoop up a Joovv.
Well, it's as you were talking about before with the heart, right? That the heart is this sole GPS system. You use this term, but it informs the nervous system and the blood and the water in our blood that's carrying information. And I know that for myself, the closer I can get to following my heart, the further am I from caring if I'm fitting within some model of what's a good person. Because even if I'm following my heart and I believe that I was, and then, I inadvertently offended someone or hurt someone or made a decision that maybe didn't get the outcome that I would have hoped it did, all I can really come back to is, well, I'm pretty sure I was following my heart and that can't be wrong. It's like that seems to be the way to avoid that perception of myself as perfect or imperfect, good, bad, right, wrong. Like there's no duality in the heart. It's just like go in the heart, move forward, proceed. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this morning. She was feeling some guilt around a situation. And I remembered the situation. And when it was about to happen, she's like, my heart's telling me to do this. This is what I'm guided to do. She did. And then afterward, the intellect kind of came in and like, I think you fucked up. And I was reminding her, no. Remember, this was a heart-based decision and you followed that. And we have to just trust that ultimately it was, for all intents and purposes, the right decision, right? And there's to absolve her of guilt in that, no, actually you did something really courageous and you followed the plan that was given to you by what you perceive to be your heart, by intuition, by source, your higher self, call it what you will. I think that's a really good way to live because it falls outside of self-perfectionism or spiritual pride or any of that stuff, that baggage. And then I guess when you make a mistake and it's revealed that you did, you amend that however you can, and maybe you thought you were listening to your heart, but there was something else speaking to you and it might have, got you off track for a minute. One thing I wanted to cover with you, let me check the time because I know it's 11:26 a.m. right now. You have until 12, you said?
Yeah, we can go for
okay.
Another 20 minutes. Easy.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that'll kind of inform where I want to go with this. Because I do want to ask you, there's one thing I definitely want to get to, but something that I'm just fascinated by is socially, and I guess socio-politically, this reaction to the whole COVID situation, and really even maybe before that when Donald Trump ran for president and was elected for president, this strange axis polar shift of liberal and conservative sort of mindset. And it goes into that cognitive dissonance as it pertains, I guess, like the culmination of that is like the people that are really into the experimental gene therapy and the people that are really not into it, right? And growing up in the 70s with a mom who was really liberal, born and raised in Berkeley, I've always thought of myself as a peacenik liberal, like I don't like war, I like human rights, I accept all races, sexuality, do whatever you want, marry, you know what I mean? Like I have no desire in anyone controlling how someone's live as long as they're not hurting other people, basically. Now, and also that government should not intervene and trample the rights of people, whether under the guise of medical procedures or lack thereof, right? Now, the positions that I take, and I try to hold them loosely as we've been discussing, maybe imperfectly, I think I'm like on the side of a right-wing extremist or something. If you had to label me as something in today's climate, and I see that what is labeled kind of left or liberal has become somehow aligned with the state and more totalitarian and authoritarian, it's just weird. I don't know what to make of it. And sometimes I just kind of step back and look at social media and even mainstream media and go, how did they manage to do this? How did this inversion happen? And or has it happened? Is it just me? What's your take on all of that? Where you have like, someone who would call themselves or refer to themselves as a liberal who's saying, no, it's appropriate for the state and these, pharmaceutical companies to tell you what to do with your body. And if you don't, you're a horrible person and you should die. It's like, how did we get here? How did it get flipped? And if so, who flipped it?
Yeah, okay. There's many tributaries into that stream.
Yeah. And you're like, I've probably got 20 more minutes. I'm like, here, have a 6-hour answer.
So I can probably condense it. So yeah, part of it is an inversion. But part of it is just like everything going into the mixing machine. So, but it has been pretty perplexing because like you, I've always thought of myself as like, I would say even a leftist, not just a liberal, but like a strongly anti-war, anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, radical environmentalist leftist who, like you, is like, yeah, of course, like people should choose without shame whatever sexual expression that they want, and of course, like there should be no discrimination based on race, and we have to rehumanize each other, et cetera. And like all of a sudden, the label of liberal or left is going toward people who are accepting with little question the messages of the corporate political complex. And, believing what the intelligence agency is saying and believing what the pharmaceutical companies are saying. I'm like, hold on. I thought that questioning authority was left, and the right was supposed to be authoritarian. I'm like, I'm confused here. Why are you calling me
too.
a right winger when I'm doing the same thing I've always done? Like, since when is like believing the messaging of the pharmaceutical, like big pharma, big ag, big chemical, embedded in all of the other bigs, and the captured regulatory agencies and all that stuff? Like, why are we all of a sudden? So it's a interesting question. And partly it's just that the label, the concept, the category of left has been essentially co-opted and turned into its opposite. It's almost like a branding thing. It's like, yeah, let's use brand progressive. Okay, but there's more to it than that. Another element has to do with science as an institution, which for most of my life was offered in contradistinction to right-wing fundamentalist religion, which said God hates gays, a woman's place is in the kitchen, was used to justify racism, was used to justify social inequality, biblical fundamentalism. So that was the choice we were offered. And of course, as somebody who believed in equality for gay people and for women and for, all races and so forth, it's like, yeah, I don't want any part of this irrational, deluded religion, science, man, science. So now that science has been co-opted by and occupied by authoritarian powers, they are leveraging this old distinction and this old identification. But there's another aspect even deeper than that, which is the ideology of progress itself. And it's in the word progressive, which means basically that we are marching toward a more rational, more scientific, more enlightened society. And that the very essence of good government and progressive thinking is to do things more scientifically by using quantity, by making quantitative decisions based on measurable costs and benefits, by reducing things to quantifiable values. And we will, and it's related to the mentality of control too. Like, we'll be able to make a better world if we can label everything and deploy our resources rationally. So this is one of the deep solution templates to any problem. You find something you can quantify and you control that variable. It's applied to climate change. Like, how do we solve the ecological crisis? Find the one thing that everything else hinges on and address that one thing. So this mentality of progress is deeply woven into the ideology of quantity and the science that is built around it, because science is fundamentally the study of quantity. To put something into scientific terms, you have to quantify it. So, and there's like, this is starting to fall apart. Like, there's like qualitative research, and what does that really mean? That's a whole other rabbit hole. But so there's this ideology of progress that includes an imperialist aspect Like we go to countries, go to places in the world where people are superstitious, and we
Right.
educate them.
It's progress for us, but if you ask them, I mean, speaking of an indigenous culture that gets decimated by these imperialistic, power-hungry, resource-hungry demons, they're happy the way they are. They're fine.
Or they
Leave
would
us
be
alone.
if we weren't undermining their way of life.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
there's a
thinking of the Amazon, right? It's
Right.
like the people that were living there and are living there probably aren't like, we need progress. They're seem to be doing just fine before.
Right. So there's a missionary aspect to this as well.
Yeah.
That closely parallels Christian missionaryism in the last century. So as a diehard anti-imperialist, I really question all of this and question the idea that the increasing control and quantification of life, which is the domestication of life, it's the subduing of the wild and caging it into our categories and our numbers.
The dominionistic.
Yeah.
Over,
it's a very deep pattern. So, I've questioned that my whole life. And I think more and more people are questioning it as science and technology have really failed to deliver their promises. Life is not qualitatively better than it was when I was a kid. And you can even measure happiness indicators and stuff. Like it is not qualitatively better. We were supposed to be in utopia by now.
Yeah, flying cars, man.
Flying cars, the end of disease, a rationally. My father was a political scientist, and
oh, wow.
He, studied in the 50s, got his PhD in the early 60s. And he was he was absolutely sure. It was just not even a question that we're going to have amazing enlightened government because the politicians are going to look to the research that we're doing so that they can administer the system better. We're going to bring science to the realm of politics, and we're going to bring it to the realm of sociology and psychology, and the triumphs in the material realm will now be replicated in the social realm. And certainly by the unbelievably futuristic year of 2020, we're going to have a much more rational society. We're going to engineer all of these social ills out of existence. This was this flush of enthusiasm for progress. And so there's, in the progressive ideology, there's still a clinging to this vision. Therefore, it is very orthodox in the sense that this scientific ideology and the ideal of a data-driven, quantified, rational society is the religion of our time. That is the orthodoxy of our time. And I say it's a religion, and this would be another rabbit hole, because it is based on metaphysical principles. For example, that you can reduce everything to number, that you can isolate and control variables, that you can separate the experimenter from the experimenter, from the experiment fundamentally. I won't go any more into that. I have stuff written on that, but I guess just to say the turning, which is what revolution means, goes that deep. This is the moment. It's not just throw the old people out and put new people in. And it's not only systems change. It's mythology change. It's the answers to the deepest questions that we ask as human beings. Who am I? What's real? How do I do this? Why am I here? That is what is changing. And along with it, all of our relationships to each other, and especially to other life that we call nature, the whole division between human and nature, that's not sustainable.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Everything is changing.
How much of that change you describe is dependent on a change in the overall level of consciousness of humanity versus is the massive change in consciousness coming as a result of that change? Is that a chicken
Yes.
before the egg, cart before
Both.
the horse thing?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of all one thing, right?
It's a gestalt. It's the human consciousness and the systems that are built on human consciousness are both changing all together. And it can't be any other way. Neither one is necessarily prior to the other. Like you might say that your consciousness comes first, and when you change it, then your circumstances change. But I mean, haven't you ever been put into different circumstances and you find that your consciousness is changing?
Yeah, it does go both ways. It's not an either or, because of course, there's always self-referential arrangements that I'm doing while you're talking. I'm like, oh, well, how does this relate to me and my past and experiences? But yeah, there have been times of benediction, right? Just an up-leveling of awareness, sense of being, understanding, dare I say wisdom, and then change externally has been affected.
Yeah, like you find yourself at Burning Man. And
I mean, I've never been there, but
or whatever.
In a similar situation, yeah.
Like who you thought you were just does not apply anymore.
Right.
It's not even relevant. And parts of you that had not been visible, including a consciousness that has not been visible, comes to the surface.
Yeah.
And conditions are changing now. And so people are, on the one hand, afraid of it and trying to stop it and retreat into the familiar. But as reality invades the fortress, more and more people are being called to explore new parts of their consciousness.
Yeah. It's the best time ever. Well, who's the quote from? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Charles Dickens.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of that, even though I can't never remember who said it, but I'm like, yeah, because I'll look at just the most insane collective experience that we're having now. I mean, just all you have to do is look at Twitter for 5 minutes, and I'm just like, wait, what? This is the worst ever. But subjectively in my own life, and I guess I have some karmic merit perhaps, or grace, and some hard work. But if I ignored everything going on in the world that I perceive to be the worst ever, and things are going terribly for humanity, in my personal life, it's never been better by all measurable metrics. If I had no TV, no phone, and I was totally cut off from the world, I would be happier than I've ever been in my life, and more successful internally, externally, every single way. So how do you even hold that dichotomy, because I mean, it goes like Ramana Maharshi, right? And this is the thing I always hit up against when I feel like, I see a thing in the world that I don't like, and I think it could be better. I want to exert my will over it and change it. Ramana Maharshi said, don't bother trying to change the world, because the world you see doesn't even exist. Meaning that everything you see is but a projection of your own consciousness and your positionality of perception that's actually creating the world that you see. Now, I don't know what the answer is, so just don't do anything, but...
No, I'm not, I'm not going to try to untangle that, untangle that, because I could interrupt that with paradoxes. Who is this I whose consciousness is generating the experience?
Right.
But there's one thing I wanted to say when you were saying I don't know why I'm, having such a good experience now. Maybe there's some karma, there's some, something that I have done. And I'm heavily influenced by Taoist thinking. I spent a lot of my life in Taiwan. And there's a concept of fortune in that way of thinking that sometimes fate and fortune, Ming and Yun, things happen to you and you don't try too hard to tame them with explanations, which is a kind of a control mindset. If I can explain why I'm having a good experience and why he's having chronic disease, if I can reduce that to some choice that I've been making, then I'm in control again.
Yeah, because I can keep making that choice and getting the desired outcome.
Let me figure it all out. Let me reduce the wildness of this universe to principles so that I can be in control now. And I would invite, at least temporarily, a release of that for a lot of people, and to greet your good fortune with gratitude.
Well, it's funny you say that because there's almost a guilt. Like even when I was saying like my life's better than ever, I'm like,
Yeah.
God, what about all the people who are really struggling? I mean, even before the situation we find ourselves in now, but even before that, the starving kid in Bangladesh, whatever, right? It's like, oh God, it's like that plain small thing. God, dare I announce my success and happiness? It's going to, hurt someone's feelings or offend them.
Maybe you don't announce it. Like what comes from the gratitude might be that you do hold it close. And what comes from it maybe is that from gratitude comes generosity. Gratitude is really taking in that you've received something, that you've received a gift. To create a narrative that, well, I've earned this, that's a repudiation of the feeling of gratitude. Gratitude is scary to feel in a way because the ego says, well, if I accept that this was a gift, then it's not really mine and I need to give forward and I'm under obligation. It scares the ego to feel full gratitude.
Or just acknowledging its own impotence in affecting change too, right?
That's true too.
To me, your light environment is just as important as proper nutrition and fitness, maybe even more depending on how clean your diet is. And hopefully by now, you know how brutal non-native blue light exposure is for you, especially at night after dark. The short version of why is that blue light exposure crushes your melatonin production and increases cortisol. This is a really bad idea if you're trying to get good quality sleep. I've been blue-free at night in my house for many years and have scoured the internet for countless hours to try and find pure red bulbs. This is why I was so stoked to find the Lumi Sleep Plus bulbs from Blue Box. They are awesome and check all of the important boxes. Most importantly, they only emit red light, so no blue, green, yellow, or orange light, just pure red light, which is optimal for melatonin production. To take it a step further, they even added a converter into the bulb that lowers the EMF and reduces flicker to almost non-existent levels. Flicker is bad as it can cause neurological issues like headaches, migraines, and even photosensitive epilepsy. And here's a cool test you can do for your home lighting. Take a short video of any bulb in your house in slow motion, then watch it back to see how much your lights flicker. And if they do, I would highly recommend replacing them. And the Lumi sleep bulbs are non-dimmable, as dimming a light will increase flicker and EMF rates. Plus, you don't need dimmers when the light is pure red because you want that warm, mellow light at night. So I'm just obsessed with these things. I take them with me on every trip and have them all over the house. If you want to grab some Lumi Sleep Plus light bulbs, here's what you do. Visit blueblocks.com/lifestylist, and the code lifestylist will save you 15% off your order. That's BLUBLOX, blueblocks.com/lifestylist.
Right. Like I remember trying to get sober and it was like, God, I can do this. It's like, oh, I just got to try harder. I need more discipline, more will. And that failed. Right. And then eventually the ego's shell had to crumble and make room for the grace of God literally to come into my life and just go, poof, you're good.
Yeah. Maybe you can't do this.
Yeah. And then kind of, after the fact going either at times like, yeah, I did this, but more than anything going, okay, it's even scarier that I didn't do this. I just kind of showed up, in a humbled state, humiliated and humbled state, and something of benediction went poof, waved its magic wand, and here I am 25 years later, sober, And
I'm not saying that there's no such thing as a choice, but even when it's clear that you made a good choice and it brought good things to your life, and yeah, maybe you celebrate having made that choice. However, there's also the gratitude for having been in the position to even know that there was a choice to be made. And because most of the choices we make are unconscious. So even as you hold for somebody that they are not victims of circumstances, like this is a paradox coming in because we talked before about how people make their choices from the totality of their circumstances. But it's also true that we are not slaves to our circumstances. And one way to see the maturation process that's happening today is that we are becoming aware of our capacity to choose in areas where we had not been aware of it before. And we can be allies and brothers and sisters to each other in reminding each other of this truth of being in choice. So what I'm saying is that even our capacity to choose can be greeted with gratitude. There's a truth in that. And the release, the surrender, is the surrender of being able to take credit for it. Because it's a trap. Because then the next step is, well, I am making these choices and so isn't. It's, I'm better than you sneaking in through the back door. And then you emanate the stink of sanctimoniousness. And you become no longer a walking invitation for others to be in choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you said before too about the gratitude kind of facilitating the ability to serve, right? I mean, if you know that some benefit that's reached you in your life is coming out of an act of grace, and maybe you were in the right place at the right time, or you made decisions that aligned you for that experience. But anytime, and especially going back to just the phenomenon of being able to be sober for me all those years ago, it's like, not that I was even available to be of service and to start caring about other people. It's like I had to, because I knew there was something that had been done for me that was so miraculous. I was and am continually, maybe even more now than ever, compelled to give of myself, because I'm going, God, look at this amazing thing that I've been graced with. I have to have other people have that experience,
Amazing grace.
Yeah, to just be able to play even minute role in that thing happening that's above and beyond all of us,
How
just
sweet kind of the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Exactly. And I mean, that's really I think that one of the fundamental principles of addiction recovery in the 12 steps, obviously it's like, take the 12 steps, which are just such a fascinating and powerful teaching to arrive here on the planet when they did. And the culmination of the whole 12 things is that now you go out and be of service. Like, that's the goal, is to have this spiritual awakening where you're fulfilled enough that now you can go help other people. It's not like at the end of that, they're like, and now you just chill and get what you want, And
I love the formulation of the 12 steps in its purest form. It's not a prescription of here's what you have to do next. It's a description of what happens. And it's phrased like that exquisitely.
Interesting.
Right? What's the first one? I realized that I was powerless.
Admitted to myself that I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life has become unmanageable.
Yes. Yeah. It's a description of a process. And
right. I see what you're saying.
And so it's not like, this is one of the deep traps, is to turn everything into a to-do, therefore an accomplishment, and therefore, another source of stress and conditional self-approval and self-righteousness and all that stuff. But if you really go to the pure essence of the 12 steps, it's a description of a process.
Oh my God, you're so right, dude. This is great.
Yet, even though it's just a description of a process, it has a potent transformational effect. And this goes back to power versus force. You don't have to force yourself to go through the process. You can trust that when the information comes in, the description of the future comes in, it's written in the past tense, the 12 steps. But you can trust when that comes in, it works on you. You have taken in a medicine. And then you find yourself fulfilling the description. Wow.
So true.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting observation. I'm, of course, thinking of all the other ones, like even the next one, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. It's like, this was always used to
chills with this.
This always used to kind of bug me within a certain perspective of the 12 steps and whatever kind of group it manifests to, whatever pathology they're set to address, is like people have this really short-sighted understanding that the steps are like this process that you do once. Like, I worked the steps. People in recovery often say that, well, I worked the 12 steps and now I'm going off and doing this and that. And thankfully, I met people that introduced me to them in a way that was more, this is a lifelong application of spiritual truths.
The steps work you.
Yeah, exactly.
The steps work you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that there's no point at which like, oh, I finished the steps. Like there's not a being done with them, because like you just take that one, came to believe. Like, well, there's no ending to that, right? It's like, it's an ongoing process. Or step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, asking only for his will for me and the power to carry that out. I mean, how do you do? That's not a done.
No.
That's a doingness, right? Sought. What is soughting? Soughting, seeking? Well, it's not really seeking like you did it. It's sought is an ongoing thing. I don't know.
It's the naming of something that's already true.
Okay.
But just because it's already true doesn't mean that it's active. Like the naming of something already true that then paradoxically makes it true, that's called prophetic speech. And the 12 steps have a very strong quality of prophetic speech.
Wow. So cool.
Yeah.
God damn. I didn't know we were going to get to this. I feel like we could do another one sometime. We just like dive into the steps. It's so interesting to me.
There's a technology inherent in the 12 steps. And you know, I don't want to be like it's just an example of a much broader technology that accomplishes things without pushing. This is another one of the metaphysical foundations of science, that things only happen if you make them happen. If you push on a mass, it will move, and if you don't push on it, it will not move all by itself. So the technology of force is a realm that can only accomplish certain things, and we're talking about a much more powerful kind of technology where you don't have to push, but something happens.
I'm going back. Step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him, right? It's like, what did I do? I just made a decision. How long does it take to make a decision? That fast, right? It's really, it's fascinating. I mean, I've looked at it from this perspective, but
so imagine
like a different lens.
Imagine what a society or a civilization would look like if we took that kind of technology as our guiding light, as fundamental. If we built a society around that rather than the technologies of force, we're no longer then at odds with the universe. We are no longer in opposition to creation, seeking to impose our intelligence onto a world that we think has none, but we become participants in the creative process. It's a total revolution in human beingness.
Well, also within the 12-step movement are the 12 traditions, right? Sometime after the deployment of these 12 steps and some of the literature, in order for the groups to start forming, there were certain principles that were imbued within those groups, like autonomy, and one can't control the other, and you can do whatever you want as long as you don't fuck with AA as a whole, and no one can get famous, no one can get rich, it's never profitable. It had this, I don't know, sort of insurance policy built into it of other truths that were related more to the group versus the individual, as the steps pertain more to the individual. It's fascinating. And if you look at just the fact that AA and the 12 steps in general, whatever group they take form in, have really never been corrupted. You know, like there's not many things that eventually don't get fucked up because of egoic
monetized
drives
and stuff.
Yeah, just the whole thing. It's kind of just sits there in its little church basements and does what it's supposed to do.
And like, I think people do misunderstand it, and misapply it and stuff, and turn it into a to-do list and all that kind of stuff. But its spiritual essence is still there. And some of the foundational texts, like there's one just for today. I'm familiar with it because my amazing, wonderful former wife was an addict, and there was a time when she was working that book, and I saw its power. Like some of the foundational texts are like, I mean, they're scripture.
I agree. I mean, it changed my life. I mean, that was the absolute. Well, it really is like I think the foundation of everything that I am and everything I do, although I've, gone off and gone to India and done all these other things, plant medicines even, but still there's just kind of a core of those truths that just never fail you, right? Open-mindedness, humility, willingness, making amends, prayer, meditation, service. I mean, they're not like out of the 12 steps. They just happen to be put together in a way that there's kind of a logical order to them. And they build something. They build a character within you, you know? And it's like anytime I'm off, it's because I veered away from those truths, right? And it's like, oh, how do I get back? I'm lost. Boink, go back to the truths, you know? Because they're just universal and they work. Yeah. So thank you for kind of bringing us there. It's 11:59. So
all right.
I think we're about on time. There's so many more things I want to talk to you about. So I would love to do a part 2 at some point. Because I mean, the people that don't know of your work will now know, you know, by the time they've listened to this. But the people that do, I think what they enjoy about you is just your way of thinking. And when you verbalize the way that you think, it's just fascinating. And it evokes, I think, more thinking for those that are reading your work, your books, your essays, hearing you on other podcasts, the podcasts you put out. Whenever I hear you talk or read your writing, it's like, oh, never thought of it that way. Cool. It's just a really unique gift you have, and thank you for sharing it with us.
Well, thank you for appreciating it and seeing it. And yeah I'd like to do this again sometime when the vortex of Austin sucks me back in, which seems to be happening more and more.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'd love to discuss with you 2 other things, which we for sure don't have time for, and that is next time to just put a pin in this, how psychedelics have informed your worldview and your work. And I'd also really like to talk to you about your worldview and perspective that you've shared here today and how that pertains to parenting.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
You know, it'd be really cool because I'm hoping to be a parent and realize like I know nothing about it, you know. So I always tend to talk about things on the show that I personally want to learn about. I know right now, you know, we've got an opportunity here to kind of create a template and
we can do a whole thing on parenting.
Let's do that.
Something that I've, you know.
I'm assuming you have to be pretty good at it by now because you're a really bright guy and a very conscious guy and you've got a few kids. So I'm like, oh, I bet he's good at that.
Lots of mistakes that I've learned from. So I would love to shorten the learning curve for others.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Okay, great. One last question for you. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings?
Don't ask me to make three lists of 3 things, you know. My most important teachers have been people who are utterly unknown.
Okay, cool.
And they teach me through love. They're the invisible people, the humble people. And but to tell you that, I would have to tell their stories.
Yeah.
So I can't just name names.
Okay. I love that. That's maybe the best answer ever. And I know exactly what you mean. You know, it's the enlightened master that comes to fix your toilet. And you just look them in the eyes and you go, oh, yeah, they have it. I've had that happen so many times in my life.
Right.
You know, or I meet someone
the great souls come and do thankless work.
Yeah.
Unlike me. I mean, you know, people are always telling me how important my work is and stuff, but you know, not like. Yeah.
When my wife and I were living in LA, we had this lovely woman that we used to pay to come clean the house. And she was the happiest person I have ever met in my life, or that I've, you know, been around a number of times. I'm sure I've walked by someone and they have a big smile. Oh, they look happy. But she had the game figured out. You know what I mean? And I don't know exactly what she did, but she was so full of joy and gratitude, and she just lit up the room. We were so excited for her to, it's like, just come over and sit on the couch. Don't even do any work. Just be here. Your energy is so contagious and so beautiful. And
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was a great lesson in, because I might look at it like this. I could sort of project an experience on her and go, oh man, poor lady. She's over here cleaning our house. Like, God, that's got to suck. And again, back to that perspective, apparently for her, based on, you know, her gratitude, graciousness, the joy that she exuded, she loved it. And she would tell me how much pride she took in her work and how she loved being in these beautiful homes, and all of her clients were such great people, including us. And she is living the dream. But I project my experience onto that, like, oh my God, I would kill myself if I had to go around and clean houses all day, you know? So I totally get that. Sometimes our teachers are unassuming and even more profound than the ones that we see on stage or, you know, read a book by. So thank you. Speaking of books, tell us where we can find your books, website, all that stuff.
The internet.
The internet.
My most recent essays are all on Substack. It's charleseisenstein.substack or substack.charleseisenstein, something like that.
And those are linked on your website too.
Sort of, yeah.
Charles Eisenstein.
My website's a bit in disarray, but
charleseisenstein.org. Is that it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Because I was researching some of your writing and I found links to them on there. I mean, I dug a little bit, but it wasn't that hard to find.
Yeah.
So thanks, man. Thanks for coming by and taking the time. I know you're on your way to the airport here soon. I appreciate you carving out a Monday morning, really set my week off to a great start.
Yeah,
and,
my pleasure. It was great. Yeah.
Great to get to know you too.
Yeah. Yeah, likewise.
Well, just when I think I've learned just about everything there is to know during the past 6+ years of producing this podcast, someone like Charles Eisenstein comes along and just, exploding head emoji. I trust that this was as informative and inspiring for you as it was for me. It's such a pleasure to have these conversations, and even more of a pleasure to have people like you listen in as flies on the proverbial wall. So thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we've got another very interesting episode. That's number 393, Ketamine Therapy and the Psychedelic Medicine Revolution with Zappy Zappelin. And man, really another great guy. I'm just having so much fun with these guests. They just keep getting better and better. And Zappy is just a character doing incredible things in the world to uplift humanity and all the things. So please subscribe to the show. And that way, each and every week, these episodes will be magically downloaded to your device or computer. And you don't have to worry about missing anything. God forbid you would miss an episode of the Lifestylist Podcast. I know I don't miss any of them, so I'll hold you to the same standard. Seriously, though, what I would like you to do is get educated about the issues around blue light exposure. I think some of us are becoming aware that having our homes lit with non-native blue light at night and putting our faces in these screens all day is not doing us any favors. So I went ahead and started my own blue blocking eyewear brand, having a background in fashion as well as all things biohacking. I married those two bodies of experience with my eyewear brand called Gilded. You can find that at gildedbylukestory.com. That's G-I-L-D, gildedbylukestory.com. We've got prescription glasses now as well as readers. And I'll be rolling out more frame styles and kids blue blockers very soon. So hop on that site and check out what we've got to offer there. And I think you'll really enjoy it. If you want to stay in touch with me and all things Lifestylist, it's very easy to do. I'd love to send you an email every Tuesday with the videos and audio and all of the show notes and transcripts from every episode. That's my newsletter. You can find it very easily. Go to lukestory.com/newsletter, enter your name and your best email. And every Tuesday, I'll shoot you an email. And I send very few emails other than just free content, by the way. Really, my Gilded eyewear brand's the first thing I've produced other than the odd, had an EMF class a while ago, which is still there on my site. But, I don't really sell a lot. I represent other brands that I'm into that I want to share with you as an affiliate. And those are some of the brands you hear as sponsors on this podcast and brands in my online store. But typically, when you sign up for my newsletter, you're just going to get high-value, long-form content. And the newsletter is becoming increasingly important to me as an unbridled, uncensored way to communicate information directly from my heart and mind to yours. I find that the social media platforms are becoming increasingly sketchy and authoritarian. That's my new word of the day. I think we talked about that a bit in this conversation. Call it what you will. It's only a matter of time before a guy like me, who tends to be rather outspoken and unedited, potentially gets nuked from these platforms and lose my connection to you. Now, I'd hope that would never happen with the podcast, of course. I would still find a way to set up a microphone and put it somewhere where you could find it. But I think the newsletter is a really great way for us to keep in touch. So again, go to lukestory.com/newsletter. And if you do that, you will really never miss anything that I'm up to if you are so inclined. Thank you so much. I hope your year of 2022 is off to a bang. Listen, I understand it's a very confusing and challenging time for many of us. I feel so much for people who have lost their ability to earn a living and travel where they feel like traveling and all of the things, and people that have gotten ill with all kinds of different things. Who knows what they're getting ill with? It happens. People die. People get sick. It can be very tragic to be a human being and certainly daunting and challenging a lot of the time. But I want to let you know, it was a really challenging year for me. in 2021. Quality problems, but a lot of problems nonetheless. A lot of lessons and challenges. Wow. Yeah. What a year. But anyway, I live to tell the tale. And obviously, if you're hearing my voice right now, you did as well. But despite the insanity we see in the world, I just want to offer the perspective that we're getting a myopic view of a very radical turning point in the journey of humanity, and things are really reaching a critical mass of change. And oftentimes when we approach a catalytic period of time as a species, it appears that everything's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But sometimes that, cocoon that the caterpillar has built can seem confining and dark. However, as we know, using a really cheap metaphor here, that when conditions are appropriate and timing is right, that butterfly does indeed emerge and then die shortly after. No, I'm just kidding, but that is what happens. Life is 100% fatal, as they say. But in all seriousness, I think there's always something each of us can find to be grateful for. I think of the book, A Man's Search for Meaning, about a man going through some incredibly trying times. That would be an understatement to frame it that way, but I'll do so in the interest of time, and still manage to, find the beauty in life. And sometimes that beauty is just, having someone near and dear to you that you can love and be loved by. And sometimes it's just changing one's perspective from moment to moment in those dark hours, the dark night of the soul. I'm sure that many of you listening are familiar with that term. And if you're not familiar with that term, I'm sure you're familiar with the phenomenon in the human experience of just going through challenging times. And I think as a collective, at this particular juncture, we are in a dark night of the soul of all dark nights. And on the other side of that, I can only hope and only pray and believe that there is, in fact, a new world just waiting to emerge as the collective level of consciousness of humanity, and really the energy field of the entire earth, is upgraded. And sometimes in the midst of an upgrade, things get a little clunky, to say the least. So, that's my go get 'em kid slap on the back for 2022. If you're having a hard time, man, hang in there. I just want to let you know there is always, always hope. I mean, I've had periods in my life where I've been in immense suffering and obsessed with suicidal thoughts and all kinds of darkness. And I made it through. I'm making it through. If I did it, I know you can do it. So keep your chin up, know that I love you, and I hope that this show is continuing to support you in your journey each week, and I'll see you on Tuesday.